I've had this internal struggle, so to speak, and I'm not too sure if this is really still the landscape of the self-help space, but I remember a time when a powerful piece of advice that you would often hear was that you just needed to learn to love yourself and appreciate you for who you are. I don't really know how much I agree with this piece of advice anymore, as I believed that for a long time and can even remember having conversations with friends where I heavily pushed this exact same ideal that you need to love yourself, and by doing so, many of your problems will seem way more small than they actually are. For many of you, that may even be the exact same way that you kind of got started on this self-help journey, was that by believing in self-love, you can kind of make your life be less difficult as you may see it. Although lately I've really begun to really question that very ideology, and have really contended with the idea of self-love, and have asked myself, would it be better to find all that annoys you about yourself and really decide to change everything from that? Or if I wanted to really generalize this into the topic of this video and what I want to explore, it would boil down to the question of, should you really love yourself? So what exactly does that mean? For those of you who don't know what self-love is, self-love essentially boils down to you appreciating yourself for who you are currently as you are. You know, all the things that you appreciate about yourself, all the things that you hate about yourself. Self-love is essentially taking that and deciding that you are worth enough to take care of yourself as you currently are. Remember the saying, take care of yourself like you would a friend? Self-love basically coined, or, is the main genesis for that specific term. And, what are some things you would do for a friend? Well, you would always look after your friends and check in on them to make sure that if they're okay. You'd make sure they're doing things that make them happier, healthier, and all around better human beings as a whole. So self-love really aims to ask the question, why wouldn't you do the same thing for yourself if you love yourself? Another thing you do for a friend as well is you speak to them with kindness and understanding, and be open to understanding their specific perspective, especially if it's different from yours. You wouldn't chastise them and criticize them too harshly on their ideas, as you may do for yourself. And self-love kind of basically focuses on making it so that you are less critical of yourself as well. It focuses also on having self-compassion and doing self-care as the main points that I kind of just pointed out in that friend example right there, with the whole encompassing goal to be learning to accept who you are as you currently are. You embrace all your shortcomings and imperfections. You lower the self-criticism that you may speak with, especially if you're a hypercritical person. Like, I know I am very hypercritical, and my own internal voice a lot of the times can be very harsh. And the main goal in the whole thing of self-love is that you are to recognize that you have worth as a human being, and you have worth as you currently are, all the flaws and imperfections included. So don't get me wrong, this is, it's a good idea. All that's outlined in self-love is truly good advice, and I will later cover some of the aspects that I feel should actually be implemented and that you should implement in your life. But I believe that in some sense, and if taken the wrong way, it can really hold you back from realizing your potential that you have as a human being. The motivation and fuel that you may get from wanting to become better can often originate from your feeling of insufficiency, as well as feeling like you are less than you could be. And self-love, if taken the wrong way, could possibly negate that. You could kind of lose the activation energy that is needed to really spark a change in your life. If you're happy with who you are, then why would you change? If there's nothing that you deem as inherently wrong, since you're loving yourself, what's the point in even having the motivation or the will and want to change who you currently are? You may also take it to, if you take it too far, to the idea where you can remain where you are because you are enough as you are. And while I said before it is important to regulate how harshly you judge yourself, even when it comes to your mistakes, I feel that you still have to hold yourself to some specific level of accountability. Just because you accept yourself as the way you are doesn't mean that you shouldn't change. You shouldn't stay exactly as you are, because there are definitely some things that you should improve upon. And the hard part becomes then figuring out what exactly that is. Using self-acceptance, I guess in this case, is kind of like a cop-out to some degree. To negate you ever having to change is not really the right way to focus your efforts. In my opinion, this is not really what the mindset of loving yourself was created with either, and I do see loving yourself more as a stepping stone in your self-development journey, and that is how it should be specifically used. Now, early in the video, I actually posed another question that is sort of a stepping stone to the kind of main point I wanted to cover here, and that was basically, why wouldn't you just then take all that you dislike about yourself and then go and improve upon and change all of that? Wouldn't it be better to basically find out that which you dislike about yourself and then change all of that? The answer to the question I kind of came up with, it's a double-edged sword, yes and no. Yes on the side, and in the sense that it's important to strive to be better, and that it's important that you improve on your less notable areas, but the no side arises actually for two different reasons. One that I really thought about were that there are some deep-seated issues that I think can arise if you commit to this ideal wholeheartedly, as I'll talk about later. And two, it is nearly impossible, if not impossible, to change exactly everything about yourself that you dislike. There's simply not enough time in the day, and you simply just don't have enough energy to do it all. And there really is also a case to be made that some of your reasons for changing may not stem from the correct origin, And the thing that really comes into mind for me is that comparison. Comparison is a lot of the reason why people want to change. And while yes, to a certain degree, comparison can be good in very specific instances, I think for the most part, comparing yourself to other people a lot of the times is not really the right genesis you should have for wanting to change a specific part about yourself. Kind of moving back, like I said, the yes part before to make a case for it. Improvement is never really looked down upon. It is idealized in many people's minds, mine included. You know, those high performers and optimizers are maybe people that you look up to. I know for a fact that I definitely look up to a lot of people that always seem to be these hyper improvers who are constantly improving and have constantly heard how their insatiable need for things like validation got them to where they are. And that is an important case to be made for the yes side. But on the no side, like I also pointed out very sparingly or very, short, I touched on very shortly, you can run into some of the issues of the moving goalpost approach when you take this specific idea in mind. You really have to define when is enough. When have you changed what your flaws that you self-defined, and when have you reached a point that you see them no longer as a flaw? And finally, what even is that level specifically? If you do not define that specific level, that's when you get into the big issue, the moving goalpost. Let's say you want to lift heavier. Say you get to 225. Are you done there? Or do you move the goalpost and say, well, I've seen this person do 315, I'm going to do 315 on the bench? That's kind of the idea here with the moving goalpost. The other case for the no is that, it could be a possibility for a toxic fuel source to ruin or to run your life, That chip on the shoulder that you get can be great activation energy in the beginning, but long-term is not a very viable option for activation energy to do what you want to do and to, further your life to the way you want it to. It can foster resentment if tapped into for the long term, and that's not something I imagine anybody wants to have in the later years of their life. I also wanted to kind of touch on having the wrong genesis for change can also result in similar negative outcomes. Things like imposter syndrome, persisting insecurity, etc. are some ideas that if you have the wrong origin for why you want to change, you can kind of lead into some of those ever-evolving issues down the road. So what's the correct answer to the questions that I mentioned? For the first question that I went for, the full frontal change dynamic, why would I not just change everything about myself that I dislike in order to become someone I do like? There's a good idea presented in the front end of it. I would agree with that comment, but I think there are really some monsters waiting in the back wings that'll pounce on you if you let them. And that was kind of some of the issues I led to, like the insecurity, the moving goalposts. There are some very harsh or deep-seated issues in the back end that can kind of arise, especially if you go the wrong route with it. What I mean by this is that, on the surface, there's some merit to the idea, but the idea that you should change what you dislike about yourself is not necessarily the best, depending on what the origin can be. So for me, one of the things I'm changing about myself and, doing through this YouTube and, making videos is that I talk too fast to the point where people can't understand me sometimes because my words just come out in a jumble. There's so many thoughts racing through my mind that my mouth really can't keep up with what I want to orate to the world. And those are two shortcomings of myself that I'm really trying to change. This YouTube is kind of going to be the field with which I practice this with and really try to improve on this with. Another idea that I kind of wanted to keep in your mind is that if the urge to improve can be or goes left unchecked, you can end up with a toxic relationship between wanting to improve and the moving goalposts of success. I've heard of the never-ending self-improvement loop that I've kind of also been guilty of falling into for some point of time in my life. That can be an issue that arises. And this kind of comes down to if you hyper-obsess over being a picture-perfect orator, just to stick with my example for me personally, with no mistakes, and absolutely zero ums and ahs, as I've had in some in this video. By hyper-fixating on that, you could realistically, if you wanted to do it not the correct way, but if you wanted to do it an effective way, you should just never speak again, because by never speaking again, you essentially guarantee that you'll never have that mistake. You'll never have the ums, you'll never have the ahs, you'll never slip up on words, you'll never jumble your words together. And that's something that is definitely an extreme example, but I just wanted you to get the idea. That's something I'm trying to work on. And that's where I think self-love implemented in the right way can really help. This leads me to the other question, and the main topic of the video that I kind of really wanted to get across was that should you really love yourself? Well, my final verdict to answer this question is that you need to be particular about choosing what loving yourself actually looks like to you, and you need to define definitively what that exactly looks like. I outlined before, but I do think that loving yourself is a good idea overall. You can't just let it be something that stagnates you from ever growing as a human being and getting better. And I used the term before stepping stone, and that is essentially what I believe is self-love. Like, that is what self-love is in relation to a person's personal development journey. It should be seen as a stepping stone. It's a necessary step that one needs to take to include should they wish to reach unbelievable heights in their life. Having self-love helps you persevere through many of the mandated stages of self-development. In trying to improve, you will fail. In that failure, you may revert to your old ways, your old bad habits of castigating yourself and making yourself feel bad because you made a mistake. And this is where I see self-love as being important. Learning to be compassionate with yourself and learning to give yourself grace even when you're just putting in the effort to even have the ability to fail is quintessential to remaining consistent in self-development. Practicing self-love in this context gives you the tools you need to continue to trek down the path of self-development. Without it, you may just get lost along the way and veer off the path without ever really being able to find your way back onto that road that you've been traveling down for so long. Before I leave, I want to leave you with a quote from the book by Kamal Ravikant titled Love Yourself Like Your Life Depends on It. If you haven't read it, I recommend going to read it. It's a fantastic read, not very long either. In the book, he was quoted by saying, "As you love yourself, life loves you back. Life will reward you for that which you've earned. If you can implement self-love in the most effective way possible, you can truly actualize and follow through on that which you wish to accomplish. Because you will have the understanding and the knowledge that although you're not perfect and that you may fail and struggle and suck at whatever you do for the first time, as you expect that to happen. If you do something for the first time, you're not going to be great. At least you're trying to get better. At least you're trying to make a change. At least you're trying to put yourself out there and do something that you're not good at in the effort and with the thought in mind that you're trying to get better. And that making that honest effort is one of the greatest things you can ever do in life. And honestly, that's more than most ever people do in their entire lives." I wrote this script and decided to record this video because a lot of what I covered in this specific video is really what I'm feeling in the current moment. And I'm learning to implement the adaptive form of self-love that I really outlined, where I'm starting to push myself to work harder, all the more while giving me grace for practicing and being present and mindful and doing things for the sake of just getting better at them rather than chastising myself for every time I suck at something, especially if it's my first time doing it. I'm all in the case of this too, just trying to be present and mindful, especially of where I'm at and what I've accomplished, and learning to give myself grace for even just doing the thing, like I said, regardless of how poorly I do. Just trying to be more grateful without losing the fire to be better. Sorry if it seemed like a jumble of ideas. I'm still working on getting better, really structuring my thoughts and putting them into a video in a cohesive and coherent way to where it's kind of like an outline story. But hey, that's the point of this video, right? Appreciating myself for trying and recognizing that I'm doing this with the intent to improve. And I know that, loving myself, and I'm trying to tell myself to really love myself for just doing even that, for even just putting in the effort and trying. Curious to hear what you guys think. If you could put it down in the comment section below, that'd be great. And let me know what some of your own experiences are with self-love and your self-development journeys. And yeah, thanks for listening/watching, and I'll talk to you guys later. See ya.